Well, Black Wamba said, and this is the perfect segue to like the last thing I wanted to hit on. He said Eddie Hearn would have made this fight by now. You wanted to talk about the promoters, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just ask you, Charles, right? It's in plain English. All the promoters in boxing right now, who do you think is the best promoter? Who's the best for boxing?
Individual Eddie Hearn, as an individual promoter.
So you're not saying Matchroom the entity. You're saying
right.
just okay.
Yeah. So the actual promoter technically is Matchroom.
Yeah.
So let's put that to the side. As an individual, Eddie Hearn is the best promoter in boxing, and there's no close second. I mean, Eddie Hearn, the objective that Eddie Hearn is doing is trying to make great fights and raise the profile of boxing globally.
Yeah.
So, and he's outworking everyone. Now, granted, Don King and Bob Arum are both 90 years old. Bob Arum is obviously doing more than Don King is at this stage. But Bob Arum is backed by Top Rank, and Todd is doing most of the grunt work over there in terms of a promoter's
world-class
duties.
Staff.
Yes. So, but in terms of individuals, Eddie Hearn, there's no close second, seriously. I mean, and Eddie Hearn and I have had several conversations, and I've challenged some things that Eddie Hearn has said, and I've challenged some tactics that Eddie Hearn has tried to utilize that have proven to be ineffective in America. And I told him this when he first arrived with Matchroom USA. I told him he needed to adjust some of his ways because it's not going to fit in America, and we've proven to see that it didn't fit in America. That doesn't change the fact that he's traveling around globally. He's facilitating large purses, and he's bringing so many eyes to the sport of boxing. So his base is the UK, and he's used that base as his foundation to grow from there. So Eddie Hearn, hands down, is the best promoter in the world. In terms of the actual promotional companies, it depends what you're seeking. It depends.
Okay, well, I guess the best question I could ask is with all the big power brokers in boxing, Top Rank over all of them. When you look at these companies, like I'll just name them one by one, like Top Rank. What do you see when you see Top Rank?
I see consistency. I see an eye for talent. Top Rank has the best eye for talent in boxing as a promotional company. I see the ability to groom a fighter, to build a fighter. Their matchmaking when young fighters are on their way up is impeccable. It's second to none. Every promotional company should learn by it, the way that they build fighters. They should literally study. They should literally ask Top Rank to give them courses on how to build fighters because it's a beautiful thing, the way that they build young fighters up. First of all, the way that they identify young talent is incredible because it's not as easy as what people think. It's not just going, signing some Olympians. They really are identifying guys that can be greats, and they've done that consistently. So after they've identified them, then they've matched them properly and they built them up. So I think that's the best thing about Top Rank. And they do have a good infrastructure, so they can handle a mega event. They can handle, a small event as well. I think there's basically just 4 entities, So, yeah. I mean, you don't really have to name. We all know it's Top Rank, Golden Boy, Al Haymon, and PBC, and Eddie Hearn and Matchroom.
Yep.
So I think people need to understand the objectives of these 4 because they're 4 different objectives.
4 agendas.
Yes, okay. 4 agendas. So they all do what their agendas call them to do very well. So it's not about really who's better than who. It's what agenda do you relate to as a fight fan, or are you willing to respect all 4 of the agendas, which I am willing to respect all 4. So I don't have a favorite, I have something that I relate to the most as a person. And then I have something that I relate to the most as a boxing observer, fan, connoisseur, whatever, historian, purist. There's different things. So as a person, I relate to Al Haymon the most because Al Haymon empowers his fighters. I think that's great. Al Heyman's inspiration was because he saw his brother taken advantage of in boxing and leave the sport injured and with very little money. And Al Heyman said, no, this isn't the way it's going to be. So Al Haymon inserted himself into the sport of boxing after being a major concert promoter and said, I'm going to empower boxers. I'm going to allow them to control their own destiny. I'm going to make sure they're healthy when they retire. I'm going to make sure they have money in their pocket and in their bank accounts. I'm going to make sure they have other business opportunities. Al Haymon has done all of those things. So we shouldn't complain about Al Haymon in terms of what his role has been to the fighters that he's signed.
Because they all seem to love him.
Yeah, the problem is that in executing that role, while you're empowering, while you're making sure that they remain healthy, you are keeping them away from fights that they could lose and, more to the point, be injured seriously, such as fighting someone like Terrence Crawford or Vasily Lomachenko or the Monster. Fighting these guys could possibly shorten your career.
Or life.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's not, people say, oh, well, you're biased. I'm biased for entertainment. Yes. I mean, I'm trying to be entertained. So I'm trying to see the best fights. I'm not thinking like, oh, Errol Spence Jr. might lose 2 years of his career after Terrence Crawford, beats him up to a point that he's never experienced before. Again, and let's just say Spence wins the fight.
Still gonna take damage.
He's gonna take severe damage. So do you put your fighters in those type of fights if you're trying to protect them, empower them, make sure they're healthy after they retire? I guess not. So Al Haymon is great at what he does. I prefer a promoter, an advisor, a manager who's willing to put his fighters out there. So, for example, I said Eddie Hearn is the greatest promoter, the best promoter in the world. He said Kell Brook was draining himself at 147. He advised Kell Brook not to fight Errol Spence Jr. He was like, look, you keep draining yourself, even at that time. He said Kell Brook's best weight was about 150. Yes, but definitely not 147.
No.
So Kell Brook said, no, I'm going to defend my belt. I'm not going to hand my belt over. It was a good fight against Errol Spence Jr.
That's why I respect Kell Brook.
But he got beat. Kell Brook, prior to that fight, fought Triple G, a guy that was being ducked, by more fighters than anybody. I mean, Triple G was being ducked relentlessly. Kell Brook said, no, I'll fight him. Eddie Hearn said to Kell Brook, why are you taking this fight? You don't need to take this fight. Are you crazy? Eddie Hearn advised him not to take the fight. Kell Brook said, no, I'm going to take the fight. Kell Brook took the fight. Some advisors, some managers, some promoters won't allow it. It's not going to be suggesting you don't take the fight. They're just not going to allow the
option's not even there.
Yes. Yeah, so do I know, the promoters we brought up, Golden Boy, Top Rank, PBC, would they put a Conor Benn, for example, in with Chris Eubank Jr.? No. Golden Boy wouldn't do it. Top Rank wouldn't do it. Al Haymon and PBC wouldn't do it. Eddie Hearn is doing it with a guy who's improving rapidly, with a guy who's raising his profile rapidly, with a guy who is selling tickets
rapidly.
And he's young and he's getting better. And all signs point to him being a champion in the future. And Eddie Hearn is putting him in there with Chris Eubank Jr.
A guy that once challenged for a title at 168.
Yes. So, I just want to be clear what I'm saying as far as Eddie Hearn being the best promoter in the world. He's outworking everyone. He's traveling back and forth around the globe and he's bringing boxing to more places than any other promoter in the world is doing.
Spain, Uzbekistan, all kinds of crazy
So
countries.
that's why he's the best in my view. Now, I've talked about him. I've talked about Al Haymon. I've talked about Top Rank.
You haven't talked about De La Hoya yet.
Oscar De La Hoya. I'll talk about Oscar De La Hoya and I'll talk about Golden Boy. As far as Golden Boy goes, I think because boxing is culturally based, I think Golden Boy is very important. I think it's important I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I think it's very important there to be, a foundation of Latino fighters. And Golden Boy offers that foundation. I'm very happy for the guy we talked about earlier, Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. He was with Top Rank. Top Rank, I think, did a horrible job promoting Zurdo. Now he's with Golden Boy. And Golden Boy, who has Zurdo, who has Jaime Munguia, who has Ryan Garcia, who technically is American and not Latino and doesn't speak Spanish, but he has a strong Latino fan base. And Virgil Ortiz, who fights out of, I believe, what's the city in Texas?
Grand Prairie, Texas.
These are 4 fighters with strong Latino fan bases. And Golden Boy, I think, is the perfect entity, perfect promotional company for that. Oscar De La Hoya is the perfect face for that. As far as the way he's merged, the Mexican market with the Mexican American market with the American market and crossed over to be a global star that Oscar De La Hoya was. So Oscar De La Hoya wants the big fights to happen. I don't think he's preventing any of them. He wants Ryan in there with Tank. He wants Jaime Munguia, contrary to what people believe. Oscar De La Hoya wants Jaime Munguia to fight Jamal Charlo. Okay, I promise you that.
That Munguia thing's a little complex because he doesn't outright have Munguia under Golden Boy.
Okay.
Because Munguia is also with Xanax Promotions,
right?
Miguel Beltran. So
yes,
that's a little different.
Yeah, and then Virgil Ortiz. They're not backing down to anybody, and if something happens with
Crawford and Spence,
with Spence Jr. and Crawford, they're willing to put Virgil Ortiz in there with Terrence Crawford, and there won't be any side of the street talk. There won't be any excuses. There won't be who did you fight? Oh, you only fought C-level opponents. Oh, you cost Top Rank money. Blah 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 blah. The world knows that Terrence Crawford is elite. All these 4 promoters know that he's elite, and most of them are willing to admit he's better than all the boxers that they have. So if he came to any of those 4 stables, he would immediately be the best boxer at that stable. So, Oscar De La Hoya is not scared to put Virgil Ortiz in with Terrence Crawford, and I respect that. So I like what Golden Boy is doing. I think that they've kind of struggled with consistency in terms of promoting over the years, and I wish that they were a little more stable and consistent in terms of, delivering the fights, but they are very necessary for the sport of boxing. And I respect and I appreciate Latino boxing to the fullest extent. And again, being in Los Angeles, California, and going to a lot of small shows, some of them are made up primarily of Latino boxers. And I always see Golden Boy representatives at these fights, giving them encouragement, giving them motivation, giving them inspiration. And a lot of these fighters, they look up to Oscar De La Hoya, despite the way that he's been marred by the YouTube media and disrespected. It's interesting that, a lot of these YouTube media people don't invite Oscar De La Hoya to do interviews. It's kind of strange to me because, again, he's one of the 4 most influential men in boxing. You have Al Haymon, you have Eddie Hearn, you have Bob Arum, and you have Oscar De La Hoya. So, get Oscar De La Hoya on your shows. I encourage you to get
I want to get him
Hoya.
on the show.
Oscar De La Hoya on
I'm
your
making it
shows.
known right now. I'm not. I would love that. I would love to have Oscar on the show. That would actually be like a dream come true.
All right. Well, if I can do something to help make that happen, I will, because Oscar De La Hoya needs to be on these shows more. Oscar De La Hoya loves boxing. He loves boxing. And I know we hear different things about Golden Boy, and maybe something's going to happen with Golden Boy. Maybe there's going to be a transition. But the man loves boxing, and he was willing to fight some of the greatest fighters
Not
of
so
all
much,
time.
not just him loving boxing. I would even go as far as to say he's one of the guys that is boxing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, 6th division champion. Like everything that all these young guys are aspiring to be, he was that. He was that times 10. Platinum selling artist,
Yeah.
So that's what it is, man.